Nice. Oh.
Sorry, did I take that away from you?
It's okay.
You can do one as well if you want.
Try it again.
Yeah. Perfect. Welcome to the Bible in 1 Year podcast, brought to you by two Brits and aBible. This is day 43, covering Numbers 3 and 4.
In Numbers 3, God speaks to Moses about ministry and tent locations of the Levites. And in Numbers 4, the Levites are numbered according to their families, and instructions are given to them regarding the relocation of the tabernacle.
Nice.
Sweet. Yeah, I'm still just loving this, man.
Seriously, I'm not sure how many. I need to head back to my folks' place soon, so I'm not sure how many more episodes you'll get like this, but we'll see what we can do.
100%.
Yeah, so a bit more in Numbers, a few more numbers, ironically, isn't it, really?
And you know I love the numbers. So diving straight in to my first point, it says appoint Aaron and his sons to serve as priests. Anyone else who approaches the sanctuary is to be put to death. Numbers 3:10. So we've seen this a lot. We've seen, the Levites are the only ones who can take up and put down. I wanted to say erect the tabernacle. Nothing funny about that. The tabernacle is holy. And so you must be called by God to be in his presence at any time. And anyone who violates that is put to death. And we saw that in Exodus as well, I think, right? There was a couple of kids that burnt up in a fire.
Yeah, they tried to. It was Aaron's
offering,
kids that
right,
messed with the fire or something
exactly,
like that,
and they got consumed by
stuff.
it. Yep,
and they got deaded.
They did get deaded. Yeah, so.
Yeah, I mean, it's that whole thing again, really, of God taking things seriously. We need to honour and revere his name. This isn't
Absolutely.
Stuff that we should take lightly, and again, we're very fortunate that we now have Jesus, because that atones for a lot of those sort of what we would consider very small sins that actually resulted in death. Fortunately, we don't have that kind of, not that it's not that standard to live by, it's just we have Jesus that has sort of stepped into the gap, fortunately.
Yes.
But we still need to make sure we're living our life honouring God.
Absolutely.
In everything that we're doing, really, and we'll come on to that a bit later with honouring God in everything that you're doing. But yeah, I mean, one of the things that I sort of pulled out early on was it's making all these lists and all these numbers and everything, and I was actually like, hold on, what are they actually writing this on? Because I was like, well, no, I'd love it. I'd put it all in a nice spreadsheet. It would be well organised, but they probably didn't have Microsoft Excel at that time.
Hey, how do you know that?
But were they doing this, was there paper? Were they doing this because the Ten Commandments were written on stone? How are they doing this and bringing it round?
Yeah.
Was that above my pay grade? But then later on in Numbers 5, because obviously, as you know, we're recording after having read it a few days down the road, it mentions about it being recorded on a scroll, which actually then suddenly is like, oh, of course, because there's the sort of the Dead Sea Scrolls, there's, that's how it's sort of depicted in The Chosen, it's sort of reading from scrolls and stuff like that. So I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So I asked myself a question and then answered it, which doesn't happen often.
I did genuinely think that you were asking me the question, and I was about to say, well, Dead Sea Scrolls imply scrolls, so I'm glad that we're on the same page. It blows my mind, the Dead Sea Scrolls as well, just on a little side note, I suppose. It blows my mind the fact that there's just perfect copies of parts of Isaiah, for example, and it's like, how is it like perfectly accurate to the official copies and everything? It's like, it's incredible.
Seriously, I'm going to go on another little tangent here of people that don't believe that this is true and this is the word of God, and I just don't see how you can do it. You've got to be so narrow-minded. You almost have to decide yourself that you don't want to believe it,
right,
and just harden your own heart. I guess that goes back to Pharaoh hardening his heart.
Right.
Like, no matter what proof people can throw at you, there's just like, no, it's not true, it's not real. Right. Because even in this day and age where you have people praying in tongues and praying and speaking in languages and dialects and regional dialects that actually someone else hears, and it's their own, it's just, you hear these stories and these testimonies and it's just outrageous. So well, plus obviously we have really great evidence that Jesus really lived right here. He said he was the Son of God, he predicted his own death,
no one could find the body. Like, when you want to go down that apologetics route. But I do think that it's also that we're just in love with our own sin. You know what I mean? People don't want to believe it because then they'd have some serious fessing up to do with themselves and how awful they really are.
Yeah, it's true.
And a lot of people don't know the good news. I mean, we did our testimonial video, which maybe you've seen at this point. If not, I strongly recommend it.
Mm-hmm.
I was like totally in love with my sin. I was living for myself. I was hedonistic. And you don't want to give that up at the time.
It's true. And you certainly don't want to come face to face with it and see it as sin.
And I didn't know that Jesus had died for my sins like that. I really didn't know the good news for 30 years. It's unbelievable. So that's why it's so important that we evangelise to people and spread the good news. But anyway, let's get back to Numbers.
Go for it, mate. You've got way more to say than I do on today.
So Moses gave the redemption money to Aaron and his sons as he was commanded by the word of the Lord. This is for you more than anything. Aaron can add banker to his long list of jobs now. Yay. So he's, a dry cleaner and a butcher,
a lumberjack,
electrician,
a bunch of other things.
Why did I always say dry cleaner? It's been a long day, folks. Banker. Anyway, so there you go. And then, now here's a big one that we talked about before the episode. So all the men from 30 to 50 years of age came to do the work of serving and carrying the tent of meeting, and their total number was 8,580. So that's Numbers 4:47 to 48. And I just said, this is a massive undertaking, and every single one of them. Just to add to that quickly, the Lord's command through Moses, each was assigned his work and told what to carry. So God cared about every single one of those 8,580 men and people and everything they did.
Yeah, and it sort of makes you wonder, because I've been camping enough times to know that you can take up and put down tents pretty easily, but was this like everyone was assigned to this specific thing that they carried every time it was picked up and put down to know its right place? Or was it like, all right, boys, in your head, and everyone's just grabbing bits and pieces? But I feel like it was very specific to that point.
Well, because of that thing, the Lord's command through each was assigned his work.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a free-for-all at all. Every single one of them knew exactly what they were doing. God gave them all direct commands.
Yeah.
And that just speaks to the glory of God as well. The fact that he 8,500 men, and he's like, right, you're going to do this little thing, you're going to do that little thing.
Yeah, for sure.
I love that.
And I mean, it's one of the things that I love, and I sort of take from that is, I'm going to put my feet up, sorry if that's affected the audio.
Fine.
Is that it shows, like you just said exactly there, God cares for each of those tiny little jobs, and it's how we then do those jobs. God calls people, he calls some people into ministry to be priests and preachers and worship leaders and all that stuff, but he calls people to the most menial of jobs, and it's about how you conduct yourself, how you do that job. It reminds me of, I can't for the life of me remember who it was, but a very famous sort of Christian figure from the way back when, who was a dishwasher. His job was a dishwasher, and he was probably way overqualified to be a dishwasher. I think it was something to do with the Welsh revival, but I'm not sure. But either way, he never wanted to do anything different, because actually while he was washing dishes, he could be in the presence of God, worshipping, praying, and anything that would involve more brain power would actually take away from his time with God. And so he was perfectly happy as a career dishwasher, just because when he was doing it, he could be working to the best of his ability and doing it to honor God. So no matter what we're doing, obviously yourself tutoring people, myself making sure I provide the very best that I can for my families, you do it to the best of your ability, not for you, not for them, but because you're doing it to worship
glory
God.
of God. Absolutely, amen to that, man. I love that, and I mean it ties in perfectly, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And you've said this before, there's nothing too big or too small for God. Like, he's interested in the details, and he's a detail-oriented God. All right, we don't have time for the last thing, so we'll just roll that over maybe. Or shall I try and cram it in 30 seconds? All right, so Numbers 3:41, 22,000 firstborns roughly, and 603,000 militia means that technically each of the Israelite women must have had 27 kids, if you take it literally. So talk about being fruitful. However, Adam added in that you could be including servants in those figures, which then maybe dilutes it down to...
Yes, because as a servant, you could become a member of the family, right? Technically.
So anyway, if anyone was wondering about the numbers looking a bit crazy there,
Yeah, that'll do it. Anyway, any questions, visit the Facebook page, 2 Brits and aBible.
And please like and subscribe to share the word of God.